I'll be listening to the black scene, asking every question like it's a vaccine.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Anti-Racism News. What if we told you that white supremacy never sleeps and is always targeting and attacking marginalized communities? Ever heard of the Romani people? Of course you have. You've heard them called wanderers and travelers, but do you know who the Romani are, or are you filled with anti-Romani propaganda? The United Daughters of the Confederacy attack the black diaspora. The Anti-Defamation League attacks Palestine, and the Griffin Training Group attacks the Romani diaspora. All of these organizations use both disinformation and state-backed violence, with the Griffin Training Group training police in illegally profiling a whole group of people based on their ethnic identity. From this point, we must issue a proper trigger warning. We're about to cover a lot of ideology targeting Romani people. The G slur is present in virtually every section of this conversation. Further, evidence of police brutality and avoidance of accountability are present as well. Please be kind to your heart going forward. In February of the year 2022, police in Missouri just barely realized maybe they should cancel an incredibly racist and dehumanizing event. 2022. We've got a full-on hate group out here talking about Romani people like they are born criminals, educating the police. This is outright disgusting behavior and overly accepted by police. You ever wonder if the police want to be afraid of everybody in order to justify murdering people? Children have more developed emotional capacity of their minds than these armed thugs. Even the mayor came out to say that this event itself was a poor decision, though I question why the mayor wasn't more involved in this decision beforehand. Why isn't the mayor at least spot checking to make sure hate ideologies aren't spread in the most volatile areas of our communities? Let's take a look at Twitter for a minute. @Roma Unraveled has provided us with a few resources that we're going to look at in order to understand what type of training police are receiving. Quick note, this is a war poster. This is not intended to be used as imagery for civilian populations. Civilians, mind you, that include children, disabled, and elderly. As a Marine, there is no integrity or honor in this imagery. Taking a look at their wording, they don't seem to have any honor at all. Also, we couldn't help but notice the Bellevue Police Department logo on the top right, making this state-sanctioned hate speech. Look at this terror branding. Invaded, no cities are safe, not a matter of if, but when. This is all the same exact anti-black, anti-Mexican, and anti-Muslim rhetoric we've heard for far too long. White supremacists are not original. I'd like to note how all of what I'm talking about appears to violate both 18 U.S.C. subchapter 241 and 18 U.S.C. subchapter 245. It'll take a little bit of work, and I'm no lawyer, so I'm not going to sit here and say that it clearly does, but I believe if we had an agency like the European Roma Rights Center, if they got involved here in the U.S., I think we can make some serious moves. And are we really targeting the Romani over an alleged $17 billion untaxed, while Jeff Bezos and Amazon made $64 billion and received a tax refund? While Trump refuses to provide his taxes and we find out he's likely broken laws, this is an outright projection of white criminality onto the Romani people. These hate-filled ideological people have already targeted 4,000 Romani human beings. Also, handouts will be numerous and include copy of the database. The same database that, in accordance with federal dissemination laws, only LE personnel are allowed to have. How is any of this legal? Keep in mind the police, a federally funded organization, has fully supported this hate group ideology. Just because they cancel one event is not reason to believe that they've parted ways with these people or their ideologies. It should be assumed that they will only try to mask the messaging to make it more appealing to children and other white nationalists. This hate group educates law enforcement about criminal travelers. They've been certified in 5 states, they've assisted the federal government, and they are recognized both academically and legally, all in the realm of exposing career criminals. Dear Black Diaspora, this is all looking so very familiar. Let's be very clear about one thing. The only silent violence is white domestic terrorism. It is quiet in its intention to create harm through disinformation, shows itself as an innocent creature that just wants to defend you, and then indoctrinates your mind so you see threats that aren't there in order to make you terrified, which in turn makes you hypervigilant, which begins creating micro-paranoias, and then, all of a sudden, you begin to believe the disinformation. Then there's the other side, where white people won't say anything or stand up to these ideologies. That's called white silence. It too is violent. And then, of course, you have white domestic terrorist groups, which is only silent in the sense that the media covers up their violence by refusing to talk about them. So what has happened since 1939? After the White House identified a need to assist the Romani people, Democrats continuously pushed further policing in all minority communities, with disinformation and profiling tactics being the majority of their training. Again, fully funded by the federal government, who, instead of addresses discrimination, adds more enforcement of discrimination into communities who need support. This is a human rights violation in and of itself, and this is what white people do. We assume we know what the solution is, oftentimes it being violent and aggressive, and without asking, we move to help people by creating significantly more harm. We lack accountability in virtually every system we create because we lack self-accountability. We still collectively refer to ourselves as white people. Romani Americans find the media to be incredibly derogatory toward the people of the Romani diaspora, much like how minstrel shows and current-day media targets black diaspora. Often, anti-Romani discrimination is linked to media portrayals of wandering criminals who avoid accountability. Cops are currently being trained to profile and target Romani people based on what resources they utilize. I swear, this is Jim Crow-style ideology. How is the United States government investing in this police force? How can they still want to put more money into this horrid agency? They are taught from random third-party groups we don't even know exist or have any input should be presenting our tax-funded agencies with hate ideologies. This is, without question, taxes being used to reinforce white domestic terrorism. Make no mistake, the Romani diaspora has suffered the same fate as black diaspora. Even here in the US, accounts of Romani people being sold into slavery and shipped to plantations are clear on this point. The US government views the Romani as less than human. Don't think so? Then ask yourself this. If there were groups going around teaching cops that all white people are career criminals, what do you predict the US response would be? Right, violent and quick. In Aberdeen, South Dakota, Northern State University held a 106-year-old racist tradition of hosting a parade called the G-Day Parade. The G is a slur, I'm not going to say it. 106 years of this racist tradition from a higher academic institution, backed by the federal government and supported by state police. The Northern State University's parade uses blackface and depictions of child abduction to spread disinformation about the Romani diaspora. Demands for an apology and change to the name have received no dignified response. Imagine being afraid to apologize for your 106 years of racism as a university. The fragility of white people. And that's what all of this is. White people who fail to be self-accountable project their own behaviors onto others because we're afraid of being seen as what we are. Antisocial monsters who want the freedom to create harm without repercussion. We demand no self-accountability while demanding everyone else play into our internalized narratives of who they are so we can feel like we're not the only ones doing it. But we are the only ones doing it. We're the monsters. The call is coming from us. Even the UN recognizes the need to crack down on anti-Romani hate speech. Further, they identified the need for public education on the Romani Holocaust that occurred alongside the Jewish Holocaust. August 2nd marks a mostly unknown memorial for the 3,000 children and adults who were murdered in one night by Nazis in Auschwitz. And it's murdered. We need to talk about that last word, exterminated. It is a bullshit way to say murdered. You can call an exterminator for termites, but you murder human beings and commit genocide. We need to be significantly better about how we are speaking about murdered people because we are constantly fantasizing information in order to dehumanize and disassociate from the reality of human suffering that is happening and to escape accountability. The US government even issued its own statement on the matter. They identified that Roma are suffering systemic discrimination that prevent them from participating fully in key aspects of life. They urge equal access to key items and respect. They even identify that leaders should be outwardly condemning hate speech. Hold on. What year was this published? 2021? April? And the federally funded police are still practicing this stuff in 2022. This is where white supremacy shows its truest colors. It doesn't care. We have a Department of Justice and anti-hate laws specifically designed to counter this, and not one person has enacted their power to stop this unconstitutional violation of human rights. The police get to do whatever they want, to include fill their own minds up with terror and hate speech, while carrying guns and fully supported by the state. Dear fellow Americans, why are we paying taxes for an agency that can't do its job? I'm going to keep asking why we're paying taxes for things that don't do anything for us, because we don't need to pay taxes to get nothing back. That tax money should not be used to establish, maintain, or uphold domestic terrorism of any kind. This is taxation without representation. With all these manufactured wars, why hasn't there ever been a war on disinformation in this country? You notice how people only ever get legally pursued when they're exposing things that state and federal governments do? But violence has been directly tied to mainstream media disinformation countless times. So why isn't this something more Americans care about? Where's that one life is too many energy while people making millions create lies that lead to the deaths of others? The Romani people need our attention. They've been targeted for nothing more than being outsiders. Why? And from who? Why do Euro whites always view everyone else as an outsider? And why does that title have to come with disinformation and violence? Where is the civility in that behavior? It's time to hold each other to account. It's time to demand your local government stop letting third-party hate agencies train or educate your police. They are being taught to target you and your community. Make no mistake, showing support makes you a target. It's time to fill their world with nothing but targets. I stand with the Romani diaspora, not just in the United States, but all over the world. If you stand with the Romani, please look up Who Are the Romani on YouTube, as it's a great starting point. Reach out to local Romani community members and ask if there's anything they need. COVID impacts Black, Indigenous, Romani, and all other people of color the most. We are either united or we are frauds.
Booster injected, I'm ready to learn me something. Same skin, think fast doesn't equal same team.
That? You like my shirt? Oh, well, thank you. I got it from SDHtoronto.com, where they have a whole bunch of shirts just like it. SDHtoronto.com, attire that empowers you to have the difficult conversations. Also, it's Black owned.